Bleach has always been one of my favorite anime series. While it definitely had its flaws and being rushed out at the end was a huge issue, the series as a whole has always been something I've loved. Ichigo's journey from being a normal kid and turning into a powerful shinigami was honestly an amazing story, filled with great characters like the best girl Rukia Kutchiki to the demonic espada Ulquiorra. However, there are some characters that have always stuck out to me as being the most interesting, and in some cases the most intimidating, and these are the captains of Gotei 13. These were more or less the strongest of the strong when it came to shinigami, and each one of them has their own badass abilities that made them stand out as something special. But ever since I was a kid watching this series, I've always wondered, who was the strongest of them? So today, we're going to be taking a look at the captains and ranking them from weakest to strongest, and for the most part, I'm going to be sticking to the captains as they were introduced at the start of the series. Although I might add in a few fun ones here and there who are either former captains or they stand out as great characters. I will not have any Squad 0 members on this list because, let's be honest, they are more powerful than any of the captains. I will have another video coming out about them in the future. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment on who your favorite captain is, and subscribe for more content like this. With that being said, let's get into it. So starting off the list, we have one you might not agree with, Jushiro Ukitake. He is supposed to be one of the strongest captains with the ability to absorb energy and bounce it back to its sender. However, there are two problems with this. Firstly, the dude is always sick and his disease constantly stops him from fighting at peak performance, and that leads us to the second issue. He never does anything. He might as well be a Matarasu in Naruto, because after he is introduced and hyped up, he is pretty much useless. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he's weak or that I don't like this character. He is a captain, so it isn't like he's just a throwaway character. However, he just never lived up to my expectations and always felt underwhelming to me. I know late on in the 1,000-year Blood War arc, we did get to see some of his power, but it really comes way too late. And spoilers for those that did not read his manga, his sacrifice to save the Soul King at the end did sort of add a cool factor, but I mean, it came too late. As one of the few visored captains of the 13 Gotei, Rojiro came into the series late into the game and is one of the few who we actually get to see as bankai. We know for sure that he is an expert swordsman, and we sometimes see him fight, but not that much until once again, the 1,000-year war arc. The only time I remember seeing him fighting was of love against Stark, and we didn't even get to see that much. His Zanpakuto Kinshara is very interesting and fits well with this rather flamboyant captain. His sword is based around music, which is why his Shike call-out is play, turning the sword into a golden whip. The ability of Kinshara Soyoku Dai Juichiban is when the flower at the end of this golden whip attaches itself to Rose, can tap on the whip creating a vortex of sound. Later on in the manga, we see his bankai, Kinshara Butudan, which would be a great villain out of a horror movie because it's just creepy. The two large floating hands, one of which is holding a conducting baton for a musical director, along with the several large beings are just creepy, alright. Rose themselves describes them as the dancers of death. This bankai is based around using music to create physical illusion to hurt one's foes. Tozen was always super cool and interesting to me. The idea that a blind dude could compete with Kenpachi or Aizen was always so awesome, but that didn't exactly pan out. I will say that I love the twist where he was working with Aizen, and his Shikai and Bankai are both pretty great. The issue is he's kind of an idiot and easily manipulated. Fun fact, Suzumushi translates into English as Bellbug. So let's start with the Shikai, which has two different commands that the sword will act upon. Upon saying, "Cry Suzumushi," Tozen's Zanpakuto releases a very loud and very high frequency noise which overloads the ears of anyone in range, leaving them unconscious. The second ability, Suzumushi Nishike Benihiko, requires Tozen to swing the sword in a semicircle, raining down hundreds of blades. He can also use a bankai, which places him and his opponents in a massive dome of darkness, and anyone who isn't touching his Zanpakuto loses their sense of sight, hearing, and smell, as well as losing the ability to feel spiritual pressure. This ability is called Mumio. Now here comes the idiot parts. The guy loves to talk. He is constantly taunting anyone in the dome and basically gives them time to think, even though they can't hear him. On top of that, when his sword cuts the person, they are technically touching the blade, so they get their senses back. For such an OP seeming ability, the only time it really does anything is when he uses it to betray Komamura. And speaking of Komamura, next up we have Tozen's former partner and the biggest furry of the spirit world, Saijin Kumamura, and he is a beast man. Because of that, he is incredibly strong and has very powerful senses. He isn't too strong when it comes to Kido or other magic-like abilities. He prefers to get in there and beat down people with his own hands. But when he can't rely on that, he has his Zanpakuto, Tenkin, or Heavenly Retribution, and honestly, it's basically a giant JoJo stand, more or less. Komamura creates a massive ghostly body part, usually an arm, that copies all of his movements, and his bankai works very much in the same way, except it brings out the whole body of the ghost. Think of it almost like the Pacific Rim bot, except the pilot doesn't have to be inside. Pretty freaking cool. When it comes to the 1,000-year Blood War arc, and we get more of his backstory, we get to see his motivations more, and actual spoilers again, see him as a human in his final fight. Also, let me just say that Kokujo Shoujo Tengen Myo Dangaijo is super cool, but I wish we had seen this in the anime, and it was used for more than one fight. Sui Fang is the first woman on our list, and she is one of the deadliest assassins the Soul Society has to offer. Or so they say. We really don't see her do all that much, which you're probably noticing is a theme in the lower parts of this list. Sui Fang is one of the greatest Shunpo users in this series, even being able to move so fast that she can make it seem like there are 100 clones of her. She can make this even more believable by speaking through the separate clones. Now, if there is one thing I love about Sui Fang, it is her Zanpakuto. When in her Shikai form, it is one of the few that takes a shape that isn't just a sword. Instead, Suzumebachi looks like an arm guard that leads into a spike shooting off of one of her fingers. And if that isn't cool enough, it is black and yellow like a hornet, which fits the release command of sting all enemies to death pretty damn well. Of course, it isn't just made for poking. Okay, well, it kind of is. But poking does something really interesting in her case. When she stabs someone with her Shikai, she leaves a mark on them for the rest of their life. And if she ever stabs them again, they die instantly, which is pretty dang awesome. The only issue with this is, well, stabbing someone twice is kind of annoying, let alone in the same spot. But when all else fails, she always has her bankai, which is a little less subtle. If her Shikai is a 2-hit kill, her bankai is a 1-shot. Instead of being a small spike, Suzumebachi turns into a goddamn rocket launcher. She can send a heat-tracking missile after her opponent, the issue being that it hurts her to use it. Turns out when your arm becomes a missile launcher, the recoil hits you pretty hard. As such, she rarely uses it. The waifu herself, Yoruichi, comes next on the list. When it comes to strength, speed, and talent, Yoruichi outclasses Sui Fang every time. She's the fastest Shunpo user, even creating lightning when she moves. She has her own style of fighting called Thunder God Warcry. She mixes in Kido with hand-to-hand combat, and it's so effective that she can keep up with and even outdo other captains without using a Zanpakuto. She can effectively turn her spiritual energy into lightning and use it both as a weapon and a massive stat buff, earning her the title of the Goddess of the Flash. Oh, and she's also a cat girl. So, I mean, Gin is set up pretty early as a villainous figure, but it turns out he was a triple agent the whole time. He looks super cool, hella creepy, and he's a genius. But what we're here for, though, is his Zanpakuto Shinzo. This is a short katana with the ability to launch out like a spear, extending itself insanely far, very quickly. In its bankai form, he's able to reach 13 kilometers long at 500 times the speed of sound. It gets to the point where he can cut an entire city in half in a matter of a few seconds. This is pretty scary on its own, as he really can't react to this kind of speed. However, add that to the ability of his sword to leave behind traces of itself and whoever it stabs. These traces leak out a terrifying poison that can dissolve whoever is afflicted at the cellular level from the inside out whenever Gin wants, which makes him a pretty damn terrifying opponent. Yoruichi might be a top tier waifu, but Rukia is definitely the best girl in Bleach. Later in the story, she becomes a captain, and she is absolutely insane. This is the first of 2 ice elemental Zanpakuto we will be looking at today, but what makes Rukia so special isn't just her ability to create ice. Actually, what makes her a threat is her ability to lower the temperature, but it isn't just like she is dropping 10 or 20 degrees. She can create a mist that straight up brings the temperature down to negative 273.15 degrees Celsius. That is absolute zero, folks. That means it gets so cold that matter stops moving. Anything in the mist she produces is frozen solid and will crumble away in seconds. And if an enemy is stupid enough to grab her, well, this new white cloak she gets in her bankai isn't just for looks. They will freeze in moments. So yeah, she's pretty strong. Her bankai, again out of the 1,000-year war arc, has to be one of the strongest bankai, but it leaves her so open for attacks. This attack leads to Rukia dropping everything to absolute zero, but she herself is also affected because her body is so cold. So when you touch this waifu when Haka no Tagami's out, you'll be frozen solid. Kenshi, another one of the visored captains, did a lot early on for Ichigo to control his visored side. Kenshi trained with Ichigo before the first confrontation with Aizen. He also seems to be the angriest one out of all of them, getting annoyed at any little thing. But boy is he a powerhouse. Kenshi's Zanpakuto is super unusual in its Shikai, being a short knife-like blade. When sealed, it takes on the form of a wakizashi. When Takakazi is in Shikai, it looks to a short knife with a ring, which Kisai uses to spin the knife. Its trigger command, blow it away, creates a burst of air around Kenshi. The 2 abilities we see Kensei use were Air Slash or Bakuwantuki, 2 powerful air blasts that he would use to attack or defend himself. Side note, when he used Bakuwantuki on Ichigo the first time, it was pretty epic. His bankai was also shown in the anime being Tekken Takakazi, giving him 2 combat knife brass knuckle combo. That was shown off in his fight against Wonder Voice, which was epic. Growing up, when it comes down to my friends' favorite captains, it usually comes down to 3 people: Byakuya, Kenpachi, or Toshiro. Toshiro, much like Rukia, has an ice-type Zanpakuto. He was a young genius who, despite losing pretty regularly, is something to laugh at. His Zanpakuto, Hyorimaru or Ice Ring, is the strongest of all the ice blades. It's so powerful that he could use some of his bankai skills while only using his Shikai. In general, the bankai isn't isn't all that much stronger. However, it can make a lot more ice that is a lot stronger. Upon calling, sit upon the frozen heavens, Hyorimaru is released and Toshiro gains the ability to control ice and water. He can create elemental dragons that instantly freeze what they touch, while he creates waves of ice to overwhelm and freeze his opponents. He can control the weather, withstand fire attacks, launch ice spears, create a defensive wall of ice, create proximity mines that cage opponents in ice. This dude has a ton of abilities. In his bankai, he essentially gets an ice dragon suit of armor, complete with wings and the ability to fly. If damaged, he can use the water in the air to repair it, and he gets a slew of new and powerful attacks. In some cases, his body is too immature to keep up with the bankai, so he simply ages himself into adult for the battle and gets a big power boost. Easy. Toshiro's an absolute beast. Also, adding this on because of the 1,000-year war arc, we see Toshiro as an adult. This also gives him access to the completed Daiguran Hyorimaru, which allows him to use Shikai Hyoketsu to freeze all matter in front of him. Long before Kenpachi Zaraki was Kenpachi Unohana. For 2,000 years, she was considered the strongest swordsman and picked up over 8,000 styles of swordplay and killing techniques, so it's safe to say that she's a monster. She can use any type of weapon and has a demonic art spell that can instantly heal any fatal wound on herself as long as she has spiritual energy. She's basically a glass cannon sword fighter, except she can't take damage because she's such a good healer. She also became a healer because she wants to extend her fights. She's actually more bloodthirsty than Zaraki. If that all isn't enough, her bankai releases a deadly toxin that eats anything down the bone. And as far as she holds up after 2,000 years, well, she's able to hold her own with Kenpachi Zaraki, which I think says a lot on its own. Once again, her sword becomes much cooler in the 1,000-year arc, when she is fighting Zaraki to try to help him unlock his own sword, and her final words to him add so much to her character. On the topic of healers, that might be a bit of a strong word here. Either way, we have Mayuri Kuretsuchi next up. He's the head scientist of the Soul Society, and while he might not be as physically strong as many of the people below him, he is definitely just as dangerous. Just a few of the inventions he's made real quick. The Flesh Bomb is a biobomb he puts in his subordinates without them knowing, which he has a remote detonator for. The Flesh Mending Drug is a healing serum that can regrow limbs. The Gigai Specialization is his quote-unquote daughter, who is a result of a false body and modified soul research. Data Gathering Bacteria, Fake Karakura Town, the Superhuman Drug, which makes the victim feel as though 1 second is as long as 100 years, as well as repairing and modifying Zanpaku Toes. And that doesn't even get into all of them, let alone his Zanpaku Toe, Ashisogi Jizo. The Shikai creates a deformed trident that has a venom on it. It severs the brain signals that allow for movement, but also for pain to still be felt. Then we have his Bankai, which is a giant baby thing that he constantly performs experiments on to manipulate. But we don't know 100% if this is what his Shikai originally did, because he did experiments on his sword. It's done everything from breathing poison that is lethal to everyone, but himself and Nemu producing blades, self-destructing, manipulating itself to counter enemy attacks, and tons more. Oh, and he has an extra of each organ in case one gets squished. The dude is quite literally insane, but he's definitely one of the most interesting and dangerous characters in the series. Alright, next up we have Hiroko Shinji. His Zanpaku Toe, Sakanare, allows him to create an upside-down world. When the sword spins, it creates a pink mist, and anyone who smells it will reverse their sense of direction. But it isn't just their sense of direction. Their eyesight, injury location, and just about everything also feels reversed. It is something Shinji says is even more effective against experienced fighters, as the reflexes then become more vulnerable. He even trained to the point where words are reversed. Of course, it is great in terms of support, but it isn't all the devastating on its own. Luckily, he has a trump card. Shinji can undergo holification. While wearing his mask, he gets a massive boost to speed, endurance, and strength, allowing him to take full advantage of the opponent's disorientation. But if all else fails, he can resort to the Sero. He is so powerful that even at a distance with minimum power, he can deeply injure a powerful espada. He is a devastating opponent who can manipulate the opponent's senses and more or less split out a nuke directed at whoever is in his way. And that brings us to the fan favorite, Rukia Kutchiki. When it comes to speed, strength, endurance, and overall badassery, Rukia is the point of where we see captains reaching a different level entirely, all of which is supplemented by a Zanpaku Toe, Senbon Zakurai, or 1,000 Cherry Blossoms, with one of my favorite release commands when Byakuya says, scatter, Senbon Zakurai. His blade spills into 1,000 tiny blade fragments, which are more or less razor blades. The blades fly away from the hilt and are too small to be seen until light hits them, and then shine a bright pink like cherry blossoms. By swinging the empty hilt, he can basically send all the razor blades flying at whichever target he chooses. and if they somehow get past his barrage of blades, he can call them back to act as a shield as well. Luckily, he has a hurtless zone in which if a blade gets too close to him, it won't cut anymore, ensuring he can't hurt himself, but he can continue to be protected. If that wasn't deadly enough, he still has his bankai, which comes in a few special forms. The first is Senbonzakura Kageyoshi, which causes 1,000 giant blades to rise from the ground and then scatter in a similar way to a shikai. The amount is so large that he can use it for both offense and defense at the same time, forming waves of blades while also creating a body shield at the same time. On top of all that, it is now controlled by his mind instead of his hilt, meaning there is no longer a way to tell where to dodge. He also has the Slaughterscape. He causes thousands of blades to form circles around an opponent. He can still control them with his mind, but often more than not, he basically uses this as a cage in which he can call upon these swords to fight against his opponent hand to hand. He has the Mosscape, which turns the blades into an innumerable cloud of tiny razors. Upon his command, they collapse in on themselves, leaving nothing left of the opponent inside. And finally, the Endscape. He condenses all of his blades into one, and a glowing bird of spiritual energy appears that slices through anything in its path. And coming in at number 5, we have Kitsuke Urahara. Urahara was always one of the most interesting characters. He's a genius, an inventor, Ichigo's mentor, incredible tactician, and just an all-around powerhouse. His Zanpakuto Benihime, or Red Princess, is on another level to many others in this series. The Shikai creates a red energy that can react to whatever Urahara says. These effects include a huge energy blast that fires in an arc. It's capable of taking out the seto of an espada and can be charged up to be even stronger. A barrier that can even stop Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho. A razor-like energy that cuts through just about anything, canceling out enemies' attacks, creating a massive net, and firing orbs at opponents that explode on impact. All of that from its Shikai. His bankai is even stronger. A giant woman takes form behind him. This can restructure anything it touches for offense or support. It basically slices things up and stitches them back together to heal or make something way stronger. He is effectively invincible when his bankai is active. Another fan favorite, Kenpachi Zaraki. When it comes to Shinigami, especially with captains, the Zanpakuto is what allows them to be so powerful. It is where 80% of their impact comes from. However, for most of the story, Kenpachi only used a normal sword and was still so much stronger than everyone around him that he had to put a limiter on that sealed his spiritual pressure. I know I've called a few people monsters so far, but Kenpachi is the definition of a monster. He's powerful, ruthless, he loves to fight, and he isn't slowed down by being injured. This man pretty much has Dragon Ball Goku's will to fight with the brutality of Guts from Berserk. When it comes to pure strength and swordsmanship, Kenpachi is unrivaled, but this will also help him survive in the North Rukon District 80, where he got his first sword. Of course, in the 1,000-Year War arc, we got to see his Shikai, Nozarashi, which turns his blade into a massive axe that could destroy meteorite in one swing, or even space itself. The name Nozarashi means weather-beaten, which is fitting for a man who had to fight his way to survive. Then we can add that to his bankai, which gives him an insane strength boost and cunning power boost. The guy who was already at the top just got several times stronger. The downside is that he becomes a bloodthirsty berserker who can't tell friend from foe. He will fight until he falls, but either way, he is next to unstoppable in this state. In number 3, we have Sosuke Aizen. The main antagonist for most of this series definitely holds up to the hype. While originally nothing too powerful on his own, he still had the ability to control anyone who saw his sword release. And this isn't just like normal hypnosis. This is such a powerful hypnosis that even if they know it is happening, they will think it is normal and go along with it. Then he stole the Hogyaku and basically got main character plot armor. Hit by Suifang's instant kill? Nah. Doesn't matter. Hit by Gin's poison? Doesn't matter. Even the number 1 on this list was taken out because he was tricked into seeing the sword's release. The only thing that ended up beating out Aizen was the actual main character's plot armor. In the number 2 spot, we have Karaku Shinsui. This guy's powers are all over the place, but undoubtedly incredible. This Zanpakuto brings children's games to real life. It makes the rules, and anyone who breaks them or loses the game dies, which is pretty insane. But then his bankai, Katen Kyotsu, Karamatsu Shinju, comes in black root-like tendrils spread from him, and everyone around him is basically screwed. They are surrounded with a dark and gloomy zone that forces them into a melancholy and despair state. Any wounds on anyone in the area appear on everyone else inside. Then black spots appear on Shinsui's opponents, causing them to gush blood. A massive body of water engulfs him and his opponent until one of them runs out of spiritual energy and drowns. And finally, after sheathing his sword, he winds a white thread around his opponent's throat, pulling it and leaving a deep cut. Their head then expands until it explodes. From children's games to death games, Shinsui is one of the most interesting and terrifying captains without a doubt. This is also an interesting sword since the attack of the bankai are split up into 4 acts. Number 1 has to go to Yamamoto. He was quite literally the strongest shinigami born in the last 2,000 years. So what was so special about him? Well, when it comes to Kido and swordsmanship, Yamamoto is considered an absolute master, and very few characters in this series could even come close to competing. When it comes to Kido, he doesn't even need to call their names. He still uses their power at a devastating level. And when it comes to Ryatsu, even Aizen says he's on another level. And if Aizen is saying someone is stronger than himself, he's probably telling the truth. Listen, I can go on and on about how strong, fast, smart, and powerful Yamamoto is, but if you're watching this, you already know. And you're probably more interested in hearing about his Zanpakuto. His sword's name is Ryujinjaka, or Flowing Blade Young Flame. It is the oldest and most powerful fire-type Zanpakuto. When sealed, it looks like a wooden staff that he uses like a spear. Its release command is reduce all creation to ash, and when it is brought into its Shikai, it is engulfed in flames. And naturally, his Shikai has a few abilities. Fortress Blaze creates a massive wall of fire that becomes a spear imprisoning his enemy. Torch creates a massive flame that turns things into ashes. And Flames of Hell creates pillars of flames that cage in an area and destroy whatever is inside of it. Then we have his bankai, Zanka no Tachi, or Blade of Ember. All of the fire that surrounded the blade before is absorbed into it, and the blade will burn anything it touches. The bankai also has a few abilities, each correlating with the cardinal direction. East, rising sun edge more or less, causes whatever the blade touches to burn to ash, and is triggered upon the bankai release. West, remnant sun prison garb, cannot be seen unless Yamamoto wants you to see it. Think of this as flaming clothes that act as armor, reaching up to 15 million degrees. South, great burial ranks of the 10 trillion fire dead. Yamato puts the tip of his sword in the ground, and the souls of everyone he has killed with his flames to rise up, more or less as zombies to fight for him. And north, heaven and earth end in ashes. This is just the pumped up version of a slash, except way hotter, way stronger, and it will work on anything in existence. There are plenty of powerful captains, but Yamato will always be in a league of his own. But that wraps up my rankings for all the captains. I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and if you guys have any other rankings for the captains, definitely let me know in the comment section below, as well as your favorite captain. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and maybe even share this video with a friend who loves Bleach. I hope you guys are enjoying the content here on Mystic Stage, and with that being said, I'll catch you guys next time. See you later.